Hey, what's up, Calgary? I'm Kevin Chorney. It's May 29th, and this is Calgary Now.
The image of a hardworking farmer on an open field is a familiar one. Generally, when Albertans think of ranchers or workers toiling in the fields, growing crops for our consumption, we don't think of how they are exempted from the same occupational and employment standards all other industries are held to, including child labor. The exemption has been around since standards were developed, and while the rest of Canada and much of the industrialized world now have standards and codes protecting farm workers, Alberta still does not. The political will for change has been minimal and met with opposition, as the lack of rights keeps labor costs low. While many farming operations maintain their own standards to protect workers, the lack of government protection for farm workers has a significant impact on their lives should they be injured or exploited on the job. With no legal recourse, they cannot receive compensation in any form. Alberta's political opposition continue to raise the issue, but few seem to be listening.
Agriculture can be a dangerous line of work. In fact, each year, on average, roughly 20 farm workers die and thousands are injured. With these figures in mind, one would assume everything and anything is being done to create safe work environments for these hardworking men and women that feed us and bolster our economy. Naturally, you would assume that when life-altering injuries do occur, that farm and ranch workers are compensated appropriately. After all, we're talking about Alberta, Canada, not a third world state, Canada. The brutal and shocking truth is that our farm workers have none of the protection and very few of the employment rights that you and I take for granted at the workplace. I'm sitting down with my guest momentarily here to discuss this important issue. Feel free to throw your 2 cents at us on Twitter at Calgary Now Show. First up, let's check in with the Rant Pack.
I think the labor conditions and the laws in Alberta are actually pitiful. The notion that they shouldn't abide by anything because they maybe don't fit the same structures as, say, corporate labor laws is silly. I understand that when you work on a farm, it's a different type of work, definitely, but I think that it's up to farm workers to still come up with a set of guidelines and regulations that is applicable for them. Child labor, overtime, all these kind of things aren't regulated, and it doesn't matter what field you're in. I think that's unacceptable.
Calgary, thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight, I'm joined by Philippa Thomas, a former farm worker, Devin Yeager from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 401, and Jennifer Koshin, a law professor at the University of Calgary. Thank you all so much for being here. Real quick, Jennifer, if you would, tell me about your role at the UC.
So I teach constitutional law at the university, and this past semester I had a group of 10 students working on a project looking at the exclusion of farm workers from all the different laws in Alberta, and I have to say by the end of the course they were all very passionate about the rights of farm workers and trying to come up with solutions for that problem. And Devin worked with us in the course, which was fantastic. So you
are well acquainted, it sounds like.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about your role at the UFCW.
Well, one of my roles is I do a lot of work with temporary foreign workers, migrant farm workers. I'm also involved with the traditional organizing and whatnot in our facilities. We represent a lot of temporary foreign workers in the meat manufacturing, meat retail, so Cargill, Ole Mill, Maple Leaf, those types of things. Yeah. It's heavily populated with temporary foreign workers.
Yeah, I imagine it is. Thanks for being here, both of you, and Philippa, yourself. Briefly, tell me about your story.
I was working in an equestrian facility just outside of Cochrane where I cut my thumb and ended up with a flesh-eating disease, which later turned into an extremely rare or obscure nerve disorder.
I want to hear a lot more about that a little later on. You really fighting for farm workers' rights. So
yes, absolutely.
That's how you spend most of your time?
Yeah.
What sort of activities does that entail exactly? I guess appearing on programs like this.
Well, programs like this, speaking to anonymous farm workers as well. A lot of them don't want to be known. Lots of press, more TV, radio, just trying to get the word out and making people realize that they are not alone. Yeah. We are trying to get this passed or pushed through.
And that's kind of the goal of tonight's show, is to raise as much awareness about it as we can. Frankly, it's an issue where there's really only one side of the fence, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Jennifer, now farm and ranch employees currently are not subject to minimum wage, hours of work, overtime, vacation pay, general holiday pay, rest periods, and even child labor provisions. I mean, these are real human rights issues. How is this even legal?
Well, and we could add to that list even because farm workers in Alberta also don't have the right to refuse unsafe work. They're not in a position to collectively form unions and collectively bargain with their employers. The list goes on and on. What my students and I found through our work on this issue is that we don't believe that the exclusions of farm workers from these laws actually is legal. All laws in Alberta and across Canada are subject to the Constitution, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects things like security of the person, equality rights, freedom of association, and the work that we've done shows that the exclusions of farm workers are in fact illegal because they're contrary to those rights that are protected under our charter.
So that begs the question, and I'll just throw that out there for anybody. I mean, how is that happening? How do these practices continue to take place, these illegal practices?
It's $1 million question. I think that whether there's not a lot of public awareness about it, I think is probably one of the major issues. I think that even if there is public awareness, there's not. I think apathy is a big thing. I think consumers are very concerned about where I can get things for the cheapest, and they're price shop between different competitors. And I think that any thought or any notion or concern that price might go up because of something is a concern. So I think that too many people are concerned about the bottom line, and I think we need to raise awareness that it's a human rights issue.
Well, we're the only province in Canada that excludes agricultural workers from its provisions in occupational health and safety legislation. The only province. I hear that and I think, well, unionize. I mean, why are these workers not mobilizing? I mean, it's going to be the knee-jerk response, right? But why do we not see these farm workers forming unions to fight back for their rights?
Because it's illegal?
Because it's deemed illegal.
Yeah, the farm workers and live-in caregivers are the only two groups of workers in Alberta that are deemed illegal from unionizing. They're allowed to unionize in a number of other provinces. Ontario is the only other province that does not allow them to unionize. And we filed an International Labour Organization challenge that we've won, but the government has failed to change the law. And right now it's still illegal for them to unionize. And of the places that we have unionized, and we have certified units in both BC and Quebec, the number one and number two bargaining proposals are not wages, not overtime, anything else. It's access to clean drinking water and washroom facilities, because they don't have that. So it's not that they're out there wanting more money or anything else. It's they want water and somewhere to go to the washroom.
So people are being refused the bare minimum.
Absolutely.
As a former farm worker, that must infuriate you. It must be frustrating as well.
It does. I mean, it's why? This is 2014. It shouldn't be this way.
We're going to take, clearly it shouldn't be this way. We're going to jump to a quick break and check in with our Rant Pack folks. Stay with us.
So this is kind of an interesting topic to me. My family has farmed for 250 years in Nova Scotia, and the idea of workers' rights, farm workers' rights, really interesting because usually farm workers are family, unless it's, I guess if it's a huge farm that, is kind of industrial. And I suppose people need to have rights, but I don't really understand the question. Like, it's usually family. So how do you, what, are you gonna let your family strike? I don't know. I'm the jury's out. I don't know.